All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today I'm pleased to welcome Harrison Elliff. Harrison is a former Army veteran who has spoken openly about his journey from hostility to a mindset change. He's shared powerful reflections on identity, conflict, and personal growth. And I'm inviting him here because I believe he can offer us some stories that challenge assumptions and invite deeper reflection, inshallah. So, welcome, Brother Harrison.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate you guys. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for having me on.
Breaking news, you forgot to like and subscribe.
So first things first, you're living in Jakarta, right?
Yes, I live in Jakarta, Indonesia as an expat. My wife is from here. I'm retired now, so I live here full time pretty much for the most part. I come back once or twice a year. At some point, I'd like to come back to America, but right now I'm having a great time, so why not?
Excellent.
So, yeah, I mean,
So
I've been,
the theme that I'm
what's up?
basically trying to... No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
We're having there's like a 10-second delay here on the feed.
That's all right. I'll be patient.
Okay. So what's up? What were you gonna ask?
I was going to ask, look, the theme basically that I'm trying to explore is storytelling. And I'm sure that you have some amazing stories. In many of the podcasts I've listened to so far, there's this recurring story that you seem to mention about a boy firing at you and you become unconscious or something like that.
Mm. Yeah, so I was military police from 2005, 2004 to about 2009. So about almost 5 years. I always say about 5 years total. I was military police. I was U.S. Army National Guard. I got called up to go to Iraq in 2008, 2009. And towards the end of our deployment, I we were sitting at an Iraqi police station. Basically, our job was to babysit Iraqi police, train them, make sure they're doing the right things. And some of them were really good units. Some of them were kind of lazy. Uh, but we one time we were at this Iraqi police station, and towards the end of the deployment, and it was next to a school, Iraqi school, and this kid came up to our MRAP at the time, and as soon as he got in the gate of the school, he pulled a bomb out of his jacket. It was like some sort of modified Soviet era tank grenade thing, and he threw it over the wall. And that was a common tactic of some of the Al Qaeda in Iraq elements. They would take 7, 8-year-olds, give them grenades, and use them against us. So on one hand, I understand why they didn't like us there. I can understand that now. But I also don't like the fact that they used women and kids. Don't forget that. In fact, Iraqis themselves didn't like that either. That's why the Iraqis started turning on them. And I got severely injured from this bomb blast. Richard McKinney, who we've also had on the podcast, I don't know if you know who that is. That's the guy that at one point wanted to blow up a masjid. Richard McKinney.
Yeah, I am. I think the Punisher did an interview with him as well at some stage.
No, he's a pretty cool dude. We'd have him on. He had a similar experience of getting blown up and then discharged. Although I think his injuries were a little bit more severe than mine in some ways. Anywho, I came back, and up to that point, I had already become increasingly disillusioned, with the whole thing. When I originally signed up, I was super motivated. It was, post 9/11 environment. I thought that this was the right thing to do. And, 2008 was the year that Ron Paul was running for president. And I started watching Ron Paul at the debates and seeing him talk about things like CIA and blowback, and I'm citing former CIA analyst Michael Scheuer, and I was like, oh, yeah, something doesn't add
Just
up
for
with the story.
context, for non-Americans, who is Ron Paul?
Ron Paul, he's still alive. He's retired now. Republican from the state of Texas, my home state, who very anti-war, libertarian type conservative, traditional conservative, very anti-neocon. And for the last 30, 40 years, he was a lone voice crying in the wilderness. And it's just now that he's finally getting his due. People are really now starting to take him seriously, what he said. Although new figures have emerged. You see Thomas Massey in the news a lot. Thomas Massey, the congressman from Kentucky. They're very similar ideologically. Thomas Massey is very much we could say, like a child of the Ron Paul revolution. But Ron Paul was speaking some sense, and I was just like, oh man, the whole narrative. I was watching these YouTube videos on our off time, when we have downtime going into the computer lab on our patrol base. I'll just sit there and watch Ron Paul, and then I'd watch Scott Horton, and I'd watch these other people, and I'd listen to other people coming back and telling stories. It was just like, everything just stopped making sense. We started realizing this is all a scam. This is a lie, So once I realized this is a scam and a lie, I was already getting disillusioned. But getting blown up and injured and discharged kind of radicalized me in the sense that I was really, really questioning the system now after that. And then having to come home and go through medical discharge out of Procari Medical Center in San Antonio. And, being seriously injured and treated like crap by my own government. And then in 2009, there was this Department of Homeland Security, or as I like to call it, the Department of Homeland Insecurity memo that they sent out to all these law enforcement agencies. It got leaked out to the public. It said, be on the lookout for returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, people who are libertarians, traditional conservatives, Ron Paul fans, or people who are radicalized by recent events because they might be potential terrorists. So here's my government, after they lied to us, kicked us in the cojones, and treated us like garbage, labeling us potential domestic terrorists. So basically the effect that had on me was, well, if you guys are lying about the Iraqis, and you're lying to us about this war, and now you're lying about us and saying that we're now the problem. And it just sort of goes, and all I've been hearing since post 9/11 is Islam's bad, Islam this, Islam that. It kind of makes me wonder, what is the real Islam? Because the Iraqis that I interacted with didn't really they met some of the stereotypes, but they weren't these terrible people. In fact, a lot of the Iraqis we were with were like really awesome people. Iraq has a lot of problems as a society, but okay, our society ain't perfect. We just have a different set of problems. So, just the narrative, from talking to Iraqis, talking to interpreters, talking to people, engaging with people, and then also having Muslim friends in university, is just like the story about Islam that I had been given just stopped making sense. You understand what I'm saying? So that just sort of set me on a long journey of trying to figure out, so what is the real Islam then? If this doesn't make sense, if this lies I've been told about it. And one thing led to another. I tried to reassimilate back into society, went to university for a while. That didn't work out. Some of the injuries, the complications from these injuries had made it hard for me to work. I was a long haul trucker for 5 years. We had my own company at one point, my own LLC, and got to the point where I couldn't sit down because of my back problems from shrapnel, from wearing these heavy vests all the time, and then sitting in a truck adds up. So I couldn't really drive a truck long haul anymore. But what I was doing for the last 10 years or so, I was going back and forth between America and Asia. My dad lives in Vietnam, and he invited me to come on over and hang out with people. And by going to Vietnam and into Southeast Asia, I got to take a look around, and I'm getting exposed to a different part of Islam, Malaysia and Indonesia. And 10 years ago, I first came to Indonesia because of a woman I met online who later became my ex-wife, who was Christian. I was still Christian at the time. And about 5 years ago, after a lot of pondering and searching on many things, I became Muslim. Just it just stopped the Trinity stopped making sense. It's just kind of I see this in the online discourse. A lot of major people like Candace Owens, for example, or even Tucker Carlson, they're kind of they're kind of going through some of the early questionings and realizations that I went through 5, 10 years ago. So you know, once once you realize that one thing is a lie that you've been told your entire life, you start to question everything. So, eventually it started, okay, well, if they lied about Islam, then what am I being lied to about Christianity? The Trinity doesn't really make sense, does it? And I've just kind of always had this thing of, well, I kind of felt uncomfortable as a Christian, as a teenager. I really love God. I love Jesus, but it's like, this doesn't, okay, well, I just didn't take the church's answer, and I just sort of buried myself in that because I was just so happy to, be in church, be part of the thing, and have God. And I never, I should have, in hindsight, I should have been more skeptical of it. But alhamdulillah, it is what it is. Now I'm here. Since that time that I became Muslim 5 years ago, I've gotten remarried, and my wife and I live here. Beautiful, smoky, smoggy central Jakarta with all its air pollution and ridiculous traffic. I don't know if you've ever been to Jakarta, Indonesia, but the traffic is pretty wild here.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's probably much different to, what it's probably like back home in the States. Which area are you from again in the States?
I'm originally from Texas. I'm originally from Waco, but I'm based out of Dallas, Fort Worth now. I come back 2 times a year, once or twice. Good to see old friends. Sometimes I do some part-time gig work over there. But I mean, I kind of enjoy my adventures. I'm retired from the Department of Veterans Affairs. They'll give you a small pension if you're injured. And so I took it. I said, look, my injuries got worse. So about 5 years ago, they finally gave me the full pension amount. And I just took that opportunity to go back to Indonesia and stay here full time. I'm enjoying it. There's a lot of good things about it. I made Hydra. The government doesn't have to deal with my terrorist ass anymore. Things are affordable. I get to go, I can actually afford things now. It's like, oh, am I going to be able to eat today? Because things are really bad right now in the States with tariffs and inflation and the whole 9 yards. So, like I said, man, I don't have any. I'm happy to be over here.
How many years have you been there?
I've been here about so 3 years full time now. 3 years full time, 3, 4, maybe 4, about 4 now. I lose track
Have you
of time,
picked up the
dude.
language?
I have. I do speak a little bit of Indonesian. I can get my point across. It is an easy language to learn compared to a lot of other languages out there. It's similar to Tagalog, is how I would describe it.
Very interesting. Look, how many years did you spend in Iraq, by the way?
I was just there for one. I got blown up, and that took me out of the game. That was it.
Oh, right. It was
That's
just
it. That's it.
Okay.
They're just kind of like, they gave me the option to oh, you wanna keep staying in the army? Maybe we get you some waivers, do your 20 years, and I was like, 20 more years of getting lied to and kicked in the balls? No thanks. I'll pass. It's like, no, I see what you guys are about. I see what this thing is now. And like, don't get me wrong, like I am very much still an American patriot. I love America. I do. I did want to do my 20 years originally. I was really motivated and super determined to be a good soldier, make my way up the ranks and all that jazz. But Allah is the best of planners, and He has better plans for all of us. And there were other plans I wanted to. I bought a house when I came back. I had a nice little house in a nice part of Western New York, an area called Amherst, outside of Buffalo. And I was so miserable in that house, dude. I was just thinking, like, man, the Iraqis were happier than we are. The Afghans are happier than we are. We got all this nice stuff. So that was just another coming back and just feeling very alone and isolated in society was another example for me of like, oh, maybe this whole Islam thing, maybe they got their whole hanging out with each other and helping each other out. Maybe that's a better system. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah,
You ever seen that movie?
unfortunately.
Basically, the movie is about Clint Eastwood being this returning Korean War vet who, like, he comes back after Korean War and, he's got a family and he's got his wife and his kids, and his kids don't really understand him. His wife dies, and then he's all alone. So he's just sitting in his house in, like, I think, like, Detroit, and his kids are just like out of touch, and they don't really understand what he's going through or what he's been through. And so he ends up, even though he hates Koreans, he ends up realizing that he has a lot more in common with Koreans than he thinks. So the Korean people in his neighborhood end up becoming his friends and his family. Um, that's kind of that's kind of what it felt like. It's just kind of like I only was able to relate to other veterans or people from certain parts of the world or Muslims. Those are the people I ended up being able to relate to. Like that's not an uncommon experience. A lot of veterans, coming out of these wars out of Iraq and Afghanistan, it's very different than World War II. World War II, everybody went, the whole country was involved. And then people come back and they have problems, but they also have each other and they're not isolated. My grandparents never talked about coming back from World War II and saying, man, I felt really alone when I came home. I've never heard any of my grandfathers say anything like that. And they had way more crazy stuff to deal with than I did. They did way more dangerous, crazy stuff than I did. Now I come close. So, for me, it's like for a lot of guys coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan, it is coming home is a weird experience. Not just it's good to be home, but it's weird. And that's why a lot of guys who have been downrange end up signing up to go back to multiple deployments and doing 20 years, even if they know the whole thing is based on a lie. Why? Because they're like, well, what else am I going to do? It's kind of like prison, man. It's like that movie Shawshank Redemption where the guy kills himself at the beginning of the movie. And you're like, why? You got out of prison, bro. Why? Because he lost his community. He lost the prison ended up becoming his everything, and he ended up missing it when he got out. I talked to a lot of Salafi brothers who come out of the prison system, and they have a similar problem. Like when they were in prison and they found Allah in the prison system, they that was like a tremendous sense of like brotherhood and purpose and community and like straight, solid arrow path to awesomeness. And then they get out and it's like there's no brotherhood, there's no community, there's no order. It's like, oh man. And they just come back to a society and they just feel very alone. So I sympathize with a lot of the Salafi brothers that have found Islam through the prison system, because it is a similar type of institutionalization that a lot of people they have
But
a
I
hard time dealing
imagine
with.
people were in the similar kind of situation as you when you came back. Is that all right?
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you know, it's in World War II, everybody went. So then you came back to a lot of other men that understood you. Here, most of the society is not going to understand you. You're not going to be able to relate to a lot of people. That's why a lot of veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, what they the joke is that we end up having our own little sort of like safe spaces on college campuses. Like we kind of just hang out with each other, and we'll still talk and hang out with other people, but it's like you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, makes sense. I'm also curious about how much of Iraq you actually saw. Was it just the military base that you saw? Was that it, or did you get to
Oh
move around,
no.
look at things?
Oh no. I went on patrol pretty regularly. We got to go visit different Iraqi police stations. We traveled between cities all the time. Up Route 1. Forget what they called that one. I think it's still Highway 1. I forget what we called it though. But we would go between Samara, Tikrit, Mosul. We were stationed in Samara originally, where that whole big spiral thingy is. The big, which I found out later as I become Muslim was like at one point a huge deal. It was a big, there's a huge masjid there that was a symbol of the Abbasid Empire. Abbasid dynasty was a big deal. I used to drive by that on occasion. I really want to go back and take a look at now. As a Muslim, I'm curious, like, I want to go take a look at that thing, take some photos. But yeah, later on we moved to Mosul, and that was 2008, 2009. That was the hotbed of the Sunni insurgency, and the Iranian government was backing up and facilitating and helping a lot of radical Sunni elements to fight us. And again, I understand why the Iraqis there didn't like us. I mean, if I was a Sunni living in Mosul, especially if I was a former member of Saddam's military or part of that clique, I would definitely be trying to off some Yankee Doodle dandies too myself. So I mean, I ain't hating, but I'm also not a fan of the Iranian government helping groups like Al Qaeda to use women and kids against us. That was a real common problem. Stared down a lot of VBIDs, and by that I mean usually I was a gunner, so usually I'm up on top with the 240 Bravo or 50 cal, and cars would start driving a little too close, not following what the Iraqis knew was the standard procedure of y'all better stay back 100 yards or more. And because it was 2008, 2009, this was the whole hearts and minds push. Towards the beginning of the war, there had been a few incidences, more than a few, of like American forces accidentally shooting people that they thought were legitimate military targets, because the VBIDs, the vehicle-borne IEDs that you see in the movies, that was a real thing, so guys started overreacting and shooting everything that got too close. So then that started really pushing people towards the insurgency. People would become enraged. You killed my aunt, you killed my uncle, you killed my family. So I'm going to become an insurgent. It's understandable. If I were in their shoes, I'd do the same thing. So the whole 2008, 2009 different environment, now it's winning hearts and minds. And so people are like, we're going to set these rules of engagement. We're going to try, warning shots, flying this flag, waving this, shooting off a pin flare before people get too close. So, driving around, I'm kind of in this, every day in this game of like, please don't get too close to me. So, and then, firing warning shots if people get too close. Alhamdulillah, I never had to kill anybody over there. Alhamdulillah, I never had to shoot anyone. But I got pretty close on several occasions. And I got pretty close to, taking out a minivan full of women and kids. Why? Because they kept getting really close. And you say, well, women and kids wouldn't do that. And I say, one of the things that Al Qaeda and these other groups directed is they would kidnap an entire family, stuff them in the minivan, put bombs inside of it, and then they would use a family as a entire bomb, just a living human bomb. So that was the reality. I stared down one I remember in particular. There was this blue dump truck that tried to sneak around behind me when my turret was pointed in the opposite direction. When our convoy was pulled off on the side of the road. This blue dump truck with concrete chunks in it, and I saw him in the mirror, and I wheeled around with the gun and pointed it right at him, and the guy eventually, we were having a little stare down. I could see his face. He could see me. And I was like, mouthing, I was like, you come any closer, you're getting wasted. You're going down. Well, he drove off. He got the message. We were having a little stare down. He was paused. Like, it looked like he was getting ready to hit that gas and go for it. I found out later that a blue dump truck matching that description in that area had taken out an entire squad of vehicles in another company. So it took out like 9 to 12 people. And of course, these are large bombs inside of a large dump truck. So when these go off, it's not just American lives or those two dudes in the truck that get taken out. They end up taking out a lot of innocent Iraqi people too. So, I really hated to be mean to people, but it was kind of like, it was this impossible lose-lose situation where if I'm too nice and too friendly, then, okay, we get blown up. Then my friends die, and then Iraqis die. Innocent people in the middle get killed. But if I'm a little bit mean, like, I'm going to shoot you, then people are less likely to come towards us. You say, well, that's mean. Yeah, I don't like being mean. But then at least nobody dies. And that was kind of my, what's up? Go ahead, brother Ben. What's up?
I was just going to ask, beyond intimidating some of the locals, did you have any other kind of interactions with them?
I had really great interactions with locals for the most part. When we were,
All right.
dismounted and talking to people and meeting people, those are great interactions. It was a great time. I really liked the Iraqis, and they were great people. Iraq is post-war Iraq was a society filled with a lot of chaos and corruption. But the Iraqis are awesome people. I actually have a lot of Iraqi followers on my X profile at Mr. Harry 198.
Is that something that was shared by your comrades, or is it just something that you felt that way about those people at the time? Or was that something shared?
People have all over the map kinds of feelings about them. Some people really liked the Iraqis and they really believed in the mission of like, okay, well, even if the war was a mistake, we're here to win hearts and minds and let's restore order and let's be good. And, there are a lot of good-hearted people that really went over there trying to do the right thing in a difficult situation. They answered the call honorably and they thought they were trying to make the world a better place. They weren't murder. I sometimes, I get people on the internet say, you're a war criminal and you killed all these people. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. I wasn't allowed to kill anybody. It's like this one hand behind my back pretty much the whole time, dude. Yeah. Most people who signed up for these wars thought that they were doing the right thing. They weren't like, I'm going to go overseas and kill a bunch of innocent women and children. Nobody thought like that.
Right,
there were some people who did that, and those people were dealt with pretty quickly. But by and large, this was the dicey situation, and Afghanistan was similar. There were a lot of situations where kids were used against forces and the kids were used against us in Afghanistan. So it's a dicey situation where you got to like try and like one hand win them over, but you also don't want them to get too close. And that's kind of since that time, I've kind of moved beyond that. But for a while, I had this kind of like love-hate relationship with Muslims coming home where I'd be like, I really like you, but I don't want you to get too close to me either. That's just
I think that's many people that you just described. Like so many are probably in that boat.
a lot. I think a lot of people are. I mean, I wasn't a hippie. But I also wasn't like a baby munching war criminal either. Most people aren't, and like people are. Iraq and Afghanistan were so weird. They weren't like normal wars. It wasn't like World War One where it's over the top and you're gonna melee. It's a lot of very cloak and dagger weirdness. And a lot of just like just dealing with craziness in just normal everyday situations that just comes out of nowhere. That was more what it was like. But then again, for the most part, by that time in most of the places that we were at, things were pretty peaceful. And alhamdulillah, whether you agree with the war or not, most people don't. I certainly don't. There now is there's a positive turnaround. Things are starting to go well in Iraq. So despite all the chaos and all the nonsense that happened, I talked to Iraqis. They're like, our country's has a lot of problems still, but we're going in a somewhat positive direction. Things are safe now. I know people have been back to Baghdad as tourists. I've had a lot of Iraqis invite me to come back. A lot of people who know my story follow me and they're like, come on back. We'd love to have you for tea. I'm like, really? I'm like, yeah, come on back. You're not going to kill me? No, come on back. We love you. Come on now. I'm like, all right, cool. So at some point I'll have to go back myself.
How's your Arabic?
Shway shway. I'm just now learning Tajweed. So I don't know. I'm gonna go with a friend who's Iraqi and speaks English is probably the way I'm gonna cut it. That's my goal.
Yeah, I like the way that you say tajweed, like you make it sound very exotic.
Tajweed.
You know, like
Super
on
exotic,
Mad
bro.
Mabluk, you say munafiq as munafiq.
Munafik.
Yeah, look, I was listening to that podcast and I was laughing, and I think people were wondering, like, why is this guy laughing by himself?
No, we Arabic words are really hard for people. Arabic is a hard language to learn when it comes to pronunciation. Um, and then there's this weird cultural thing about Americans where you could tell which side of the cultural political divide someone is on by how they pronounce foreign words. So white liberals who are super well educated will always go to over announce everything. I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. I really love his work, but he always over enunciates everything beyond what normal Arabs will say. I've noticed that about Sheikh Hamza. He always perfectly enunciates every Arabic word when he's using time. Like, what's the word? What's the word? He was ijtihad. He said it better than many Arabic speakers. Like that's what people from a more liberal educated background will do. Whereas people who are from a more conservative background will always say things like Muslims, Munafiq, more working class people like me, they will always do the opposite, will under enunciate everything. Always. It's always like, it's not just with Arabic, it's with every kind of foreign sounding word, every foreign language. We all do that. We do that with French words too. So don't feel bad, Arabs. You're not the only people to get picked on.
Fair enough. So there was something I did wanted to revisit. You mentioned that there was this whole incident that occurred. It caused you to go unconscious, and it was a real life-changing moment. Is it possible to briefly talk through that slightly?
Oh, getting blown up. I didn't go
Yeah.
unconscious. No, that
Okay.
happened to Richard McKinney. Richard McKinney went boop, out like a light, and he woke up and he had no idea where the hell he was. Like he got knocked out. I just got blown up in my lower back. And basically, I got blown up and knocked out of the turret, fell down straight on my butt. And then I crawled back up and I started doing, looking around, scanning the area, doing what's called 525 100s, and looking around, and I'm like walking the turret, like getting ready to respond. I'm like, took the machine gun 240 Bravo off safety on red, ready to go. And then because I thought the shockwave had just sort of like knocked me out like a punch, and so I got back up and I started getting ready to return fire. And then I looked down and I was like, oh crap, I'm bleeding like really bad. So I didn't really feel it for like the first 5-10 minutes. And then I looked down and I realized, oh, I'm bleeding like really bad. So that's when they took me out of the turret. And then that's when I got patched up and I got medevaced back to the base. They drove really quickly back to the base. And then I got taken back, flown back to what's called Brooke Harvey Medical Center in San Antonio, which is Texas's version of of Walter Reed. And I spent about 9.5 months there recovering and then going through the paperwork to get discharged. So, no, I never went unconscious.
No,
That would be Richard McKinney. Yeah.
enough.
But it is
Look,
interesting.
look, part of me wants to say no, but I remember the story being this way, but it's very difficult to do that when you're with the actual guy who told the story. So, but I am curious about something, and that is when you're that close to death, what kind of thoughts do you actually have? Like, what kind of process do you go through?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked that because that kind of ties in with another theme of something they talk about, the Mad Mamelukes, which is they let me have an audience to do this, which is to talk about ayahuasca and DMT and psychedelics usage. And I am a little bit controversial amongst some Muslim commentators in that online, in both X and on Facebook and other spaces that listen, I'm not saying that psychedelics is 100% halal. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is after going to Peru and doing ayahuasca to treatment for PTSD and sleep issues, I did find some benefit to it. I'm not recommending that everyone goes to Peru to do that for a variety of reasons. There's variety of theological issues, and there's also there's always this thing of like when you're going to do something with not worship but with another religious group, like even doing just normal activities like with other religions, there's like some guidelines about that. And so the Shipibo Indians in Peru are beautiful, wonderful people. And they're not, devil worshippers who sacrifice babies to Quetzaltenango or anything like that. But they have their ways and we have ours. So what I've said pretty consistently is two things. One, the DMT ayahuasca experience is very similar to the feeling of dying that I had. I was close to death in that experience. It was a very peaceful feeling. It was a wonderful feeling. I was actually, people ask me, are you traumatized by dying? I say, oh, it was probably one of the best days of my life. That was a really great time. I was like, I'm ready to come home. This is wonderful. That's great. And then it didn't happen. And then all these other crazy stuff happened. I would say coming home and having to deal with a lot of lies and nonsense and having like deep sort of like philosophical questions about your existence and what was your purpose in all this. That was much more difficult than dying. Dying was easy. And in fact, that's part of the reason why some guys keep volunteering to go do crazy stuff like that. And they're so comfortable with dying, but they're not comfortable with coming home because dying gets to be easy. And trying to come home and live a normal life, it's not easy. See, one of the things that happens coming back from war, especially in these wars, more so than others in the past. And especially if you've had experience of dying, and especially if you've had experience of being around Muslims for a long period of time, having good experience, good and bad experiences with them, and then realizing your government is lying to you, uh, is, it's not just PTSD, like, I hate people, I want to kill everybody. It's like, what's real? What's real? It's like, I went through this period of time in my life where, like, I didn't know what was real anymore. I'd be like, am I real? Is this chair? Is this table real?
It's
Is this
kind of like a
camera real?
Matrix moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, it was a real Matrix moment. And that was like really much weirder than dying. Dying was much easier. Ayahuasca is often described as dying. I would say that ayahuasca is the technology, the ceremony that they have in Peru and in other parts of Central America. I would say that's kind of like almost like a simulator for what the day of judgment will be like. DMT, the chemical that's in ayahuasca that causes, I will say this, it's not Hummer. I really get annoyed when people say, well, yeah, well, cocaine could have some medical benefits. Bro, this is not cocaine. Yeah, well, there's some medical benefits from drinking wine. It's like, dude, this isn't alcohol.
Oh, you're
This
talking
is not one of
Hammer.
those. Yeah, Hummer. Yeah, Hummer.
Hammer. I was thinking,
Yeah.
why is he talking about cars? Like,
No, not the truck, not the Hummer, the Hummer, the auto drives. Yes, no, Hummer. Yes, yeah, the intoxicant. Um,
so how come?
it's not.
Why not?
What's up?
Why is it not Hammer?
Okay, I'll tell you why. The best argument that I can give against ayahuasca, or against DMT, is that uh, you're not ready for this world, and you're possibly going to interact or have negative jinn attach themselves to you. But it's not the same thing as being intoxicated. It's quite the opposite of being intoxicated. It's like a light switch goes on. It's like you have an incredible amount of self-awareness. It's like you're seeing reality with a different wavelength filter, you know. So that is it is like a simulation. It felt exactly like dying in Iraq or getting close to it. It felt exactly like some very intense dreams I had before I became Muslim that led to Islam. This is like a very intense type of dreaming. And just as there's an Islamic science of dreaming, I would argue that this is pretty close to some of that. And about 6 months after I did that ayahuasca experience, I was invited into the Nashbandi Talika. And it's pretty common among converts who become Nashbandi, almost all of them, not all of them, but a good number of them have a background in psychedelics. One of two things happens. Either they have terrible experiences in psychedelics and they're like, oh, that was really horrifying, and they just run to the straight and narrow path, or they're like, have beautiful experiences like I had. They're like, oh, yeah, God is real. And yeah, Islam just makes so much sense, and alhamdulillah for everything. And wow, beautiful. I'm in Islam now. Wow,
So
eventually just
what
like in
did you
Islam.
actually see through this experience? Was it like a dream that you're talking about?
Well, the DMT fairies that everybody harps on and talks about.
Not
You know
really.
those.
I'm a good Muslim boy. I stay away from these.
You good Muslim boy? Okay. Well, I saw that. Again, I want to put this out there. I am not saying that people need to go to Peru or go to visit some shaman in the jungle or see the DMT elves or the fairies, as they're called. You don't need to go through all that. You do not have to do that. And in fact, it is still very controversial in Islam to do that. Um, but the elves are these creatures that you see when you do a lot of DMT. They're like little elfish looking fairy things, and they tell you messages and they tell you things about yourself, and they say that things that you're doing wrong. So the argument amongst scientists and researchers that and by the way, there were scientists and researchers in the group I was in. So this is not
Wait,
just
wait,
about
what
people
are
having
we
fun.
talking about? Are we talking about voices? Were you talking about voices or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, you can hear voices. You can hear voices from them, or you can just have an understanding about what they're saying. Some people will say that the DMT elves are another creature in another dimension. And other people will say, no, it's part of you that's having a conversation with yourself. I am inclined to say, after that experience, that it's a part of you having a conversation with yourself, sort of like your heart talking to your head kind of dialogue. Does that make sense? Um, so I
Yep,
think these
makes
are
sense.
just yeah, some people see elves. A lot of people don't see anything. A lot of people just sit there in the dark drinking this brew and they're like, oh man, I'm screwing this up. You ever had that feeling after doing a lot of being in subdued for a long time, or doing Thicker for a long time, where like you come out, you start to have like realizations that you're doing something wrong with your life? Like, oh man, I need to make Toba for that. I need to repent. I'm wrong here. You ever have a feeling like that?
Yeah, even outside of liquor, that's an ongoing thing.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like a really intense version of that for a lot of people. In my case, I actually am really sensitive to this stuff. So I don't just like, I actually saw the full DMTLs, and the way they revealed to themselves to me is I took the brew and
Oh,
everybody, I
you saw
took the
them as
drink.
physical forms? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I did. They appeared to me as like little Keebler elves from the Keebler cookies with my head on top of it. Like they
That's a
were little
very American
prankster,
reference. I don't know why.
they're little prankster versions of me. Yes, and when I first took this brew, um, this is a 3-night ceremony thing. I took this brew and they I didn't see anything or experience anything for the first 10 minutes. And I'm like sitting around looking, everybody else is starting to clearly have an experience. And I'm like, man, what's going on here? And then I heard this voice say, you're so impatient, white boy. And I was like, oh, okay, now it's starting to work. Now I'm really starting to feel it. And eventually they present themselves to me. And I'm like, and they, for some reason they spoke in Monty Python voices, which is really weird. They were like, hi, Harry, we're your DMTLs and we have a message for you. Yeah, we got a message for you, mate. Why are you so angry all the time, people? And and
So
I'm
it
like,
gives
well,
me
what
the
are you?
impression that these elves are non-white. Is that what you're kind of alluding to?
No, I'd just say that the elves can appear in all kinds of forms or ways to people, depending on who you are. But I asked the elves, what are they? Are they jinn? And they said, no, we're you. We're you telling you that you're stupid and you're doing stupid things. Stop doing stupid things.
Wow.
And then they said things like Harry the tiger, Harry the very horny Hudgy Badger, Georgie Porgy Harry Pie. He kissed all the Indonesian girls and he made them all cry. And they just roasted me. But they were roasting me for a point. They're not just they don't just say things to be mean. They often tell you things about yourself that you might
But
have as
that
a
sounds
blind side.
frightening, the way that you're describing it.
Oh, it's very frightening. This is why I'm saying, like, I don't recommend that everybody go to Peru. I don't think people should do that. And in fact, I think there's a lot of other less scary, less powerful, less potent things out there that could give some people benefit in a therapeutic setting without going all the way down to Peru and having some terrifying shamanistic experience. You don't have to go do that. I just want to tell Muslims right now, because this is a topic in the Ummah right now, like, please, you don't have to go to Peru to do this. You don't have to go that far. If the scholarship eventually comes to the conclusion that this is acceptable, I think it's like, as Yasser Qadi said, it should be limited in certain specific instances at smaller doses in a clinical setting, ideally with other Muslims. You do not have to go all the way down to Peru and have this full on like near death experience like I did. So I just want to put that as a disclaimer. Like I'm not advocating that people do that.
So that's what I'm sort of amazed by. How is it that you did not come out of this situation terrified?
Because not every DMT trip, ayahuasca experience is terrifying. A lot of them are not terrifying. A lot of them were funny. Like mine was really funny. They called me names like Harry the Tiger, which if you look up what is a tiger as an Islamic dream interpretation, a tiger is a tyrant. And then they called me Harry the Colonizer. And then they showed this picture. They showed me a picture that I had taken. It's like they put a projector in front of my face of this photo I'd taken on my phone of my wife and I when we went to the old Dutch quarters over here in Indonesia, where the Dutch used to have their colonial administration. You could put on like Dutch colonial era hats. And they showed me this photo of me with a Dutch colonizer hat. And I'm like, I'm not a colonizer. I don't want to beat up brown people and steal their resources. Later on, I realized through subsequent dreams and meditations on this fact, what they were actually referring to me as not me being a 19th century European colonizer beating up brown people. What they were saying was that you have a human tendency, like many other men on the planet, to want to control and dominate things. And you're going to take more than you need. You know, there's that joke about the British. They stole all the spices, but they didn't put any on their food, you know. But, even though we don't live in an era of 19th century European colonization anymore, we still have a human tendency to want to take more stuff than we actually need. And so that is kind of like, out of that experience, that's why I kind of came back to Indonesia, trying to find a more simple way of being. I don't own a car now. I walk everywhere or take taxis. For me, if I started a car collection at this time in my life, it would become a collection and it would become an obsession, and I would spend too much money on it. So I don't own cars. I don't even own a motorbike right now. This is what happens with ayahuasca and DMT, is that you have either funny experiences or like scary experiences or really beautiful like experiences. A very type of it's like a very intense type of dreaming where you're dialoguing with yourself. And you come out with conclusions that, man, these are things I need to change in my life.
Oh. So there's more than one experience, or this is just that one experience?
That's the only experience I've had, and one of the interesting things that happened with the DMT elves is they said, Harry, it's really nice that you came all the way down to Peru to come see us. But they had told me this. I did this 2 years ago. They said, but you're already a Muslim. You're already on the right path. Why are you bothering to come down here and talk to us? You already knew what this was going to be. They said, you're so silly. You're such a silly white boy. Why are you coming down here to see the DMT elves for? We want to see us. Here we are.
In Islam, we have this concept of the qareen, the jinn that, or shaitan that lives within the blood. Is it possible that you were tapping into something like that through this experience?
I've been asked this question, and I don't think that those were the shayateen. I don't think those were the qareen. I don't think that's what they are. I think they're parts of your, like how when you dream, you have, the Islamic dream science. Even Seren was kind of one of the people that kind of started that. I know he's not the only Muslim that did that, but turned out Ibn Sirin's from Baghdad. I think he's from Baghdad, of all places. Islamic dream science is filled with interpretations. when you see a tiger in a dream in Islam, it's not necessarily the shayateen, and it's not necessarily hallucination. What it is a symbol. And it's a symbol of either a tyrannical, evil person that is out to get you, or it's a symbol of something that you're struggling with. So I'll give you an example. After this ayahuasca experience, I kept having a lot of very intense dreams that were kind of related to this. And sometimes the DMTLs would show up back again in my dreams. Hence the reason why I compare this to a type of dreaming. You're attuning your mind to the dream realm. That's where you're going. Whatever that in-between stage between life and death, when you're going to sleep and dreaming, that's what ayahuasca DMT is. You're flipping channels on your TV to get to that signal. I had dreams after that where I'd see a tiger in the jungle and it would be coming, trying to fight me. And I don't want to tell too much about my dreams or everything about this experience, because some of it is not really good for other people to know or public consumption. But I will show you this generic example so that people understand what I'm talking about. So this tiger kept coming, attacking me into the dreams. And I'd look in the dream dictionary and be like, what is a tiger? Wait, why did the DMTLs call me a tiger? Turns out tiger is tyrant, right? As I said before. So then I'm thinking, like, I'm going through the list. I'm thinking, like, so I'm fighting this tiger in my dreams. Is a recurring experience. Is this tiger someone I know? Is it an important political figure? Is it a king? Is it Bibi Netanyahu? Am I going to fight Bibi Netanyahu in a lightsaber battle somewhere? Like, what is this? And then finally I had a dream where the tiger appeared to me, and I didn't fight him this time. I said, "Tiger, who are you?" And he looked at me, he goes, "Hey, I'm you." I'm like, "Oh, wait, what?" And he goes, "Yeah, if you hold on to all this anger and resentment that you have towards people, you'll become a victim, and the shaitan will use that against you, and you will become a tyrant. Most tyrants have a lot of rage inside them. They have a lot of victimhood. They have a lot of resentment. They want revenge. That's why they become tigers and tyrants." And
I was
oh,
going to say sometimes the tiger in dreams, it can symbolize an adversary. So it's
yes,
interesting
yeah.
and that you went into the version.
Yeah, so after that ayahuasca experience, I saw the tiger, and the tiger told me that the tyrant that I'm fighting or have to watch out for is actually myself, not somebody else over
Very
there,
interesting.
but me. But that's
Very
how see it.
interesting.
It
How
is
long?
interesting.
Right.
But
How long did that whole experience last?
this lasted for a few hours. Lasts for a few hours off and on. And
Wow.
yeah, I want to reemphasize, I am not recommending that people go down there and do that. I was very curious
Yeah.
about psychedelics before I became Muslim, because the psychedelic researchers and the descriptions, the Muslims seem to have the closest understanding to this realm by talking about jinn. Jinn in the Muslim context versus angels and demons in the Christian context. Muslims are far more nuanced in their understanding of the other side than, like, we don't see all jinn as bad, for example. And we don't think that the jinn are angels. We recognize them as separate entities. So whereas in the Christian tradition, there's only angels and demons are all fallen angels. So, Islam is, I would say, when I was reading about Islam, I was also reading about psychedelics and psychedelic research, and I couldn't help but notice that the psychedelic realm, Sufism, Islam, they all seem to tie in more together, much better than the Christian understanding of the spiritual realm, if that makes any sense. I I just, again, I want to emphasize, I do not recommend that people go down and do this, but after what I had to do, part of it was Islamic science. I wanted to see if this could be helpful to Islamic science. I wanted to be a guinea pig for that. I also had to see this for myself. Does this fit in with my near-death experience and then other subsequent near-death experiences I'd had after the Army? Does this fit in with what I know about reality? Does this fit in with what I know about God and afterlife and the purpose and meaning of life? And I would have to say, in my case, it did. It really did. It fit in with that. It explained it for me. I had a big burning question, and I had to see it for myself. Um, but I can't, again, for the millionth time, please don't go to Peru and go do ayahuasca with a bunch of witch doctors. Please don't do that. That's really questionable. And when I was doing it, I was kind of like, well, this isn't worshiping a worship service, but these people have a different understanding of God. They have a different understanding of, they have a different set of traditions, and they have their ways and we have ours. So I like, it's not, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but I have to keep repeating this because there's one thing where people just say, "Oh, this is just Hummer and it's from Shaitan," and then there's this other side where people are like, "Yeah, let's totally go down to Peru and just like be a bunch of Muslim hippies and do drum circles," and it's like, no, please don't do that either. There's a lot of deep questions and research and ijtihad and like a lot of Muslims that need to sit down and like really think about this before any kind of ruling gets made. So I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but I have to say that because it needs to be said.
Whereas I appreciate that you did. But I'm also wondering, curious about, if a person has anxiety, what kind of effect would that have on that person? Would it make the anxiety even worse? Would it pacify him somehow? I don't know. It's very interesting.
Well, I will say this: when I was talking to the DMTLs, which is really just you talking to parts of yourself, I asked the DMTLs, like, okay, so if you're me, then what are the jinn? And I said, oh, by the way, I've had this sleep paralysis demon that haunts me since I was a little kid. What is that thing? And they said, they were very entertaining. They said that they put this thing in front of me. It was like when you go to Vegas and you see the slot machines, bing ding XXX, or the things that go down, those casino machines, slot machines. They had the slot machine for me that had Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, UFOs, aliens, and going up and down like this. And they said it went straight across jinn, jinn, jinn. So they're saying the jinn. They were telling me, DMTLs were telling me that the jinn are all those sorts of phenomena that you see in life, all those sort of weird supernatural phenomena.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then they said
Any
this.
cryptid.
And encrypted, yeah. They said, and then they went on to say that they said that this it's called a kukui in other traditions, the sleep paralysis jinn or demon or whatever. They said that this creature is something that attached itself to you when you were a kid, because your parents were going through a divorce and that was a very scary and difficult time for you. And they said that this thing feeds off your negative energy. And they said, what they literally told me, and they said, you can recite Ayatul Kursi all you want, and you can do all the meditation you want. If you hold on to this anger and resentment or fear, this creature will keep coming to feed off your negative energy. I said, if you want this thing to go away, then you have to stop being angry. And that was something that they repeated over and over again. And they even said, didn't your prophet tell you not to be angry? And that's true. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was asked, what should I do that's the most spiritual thing? And he told the young man, he said, don't be angry. And he said that 3 times. This is an actual true story in Islamic traditions in there. This is a verified hadith. And the DMTL said, Harry, your prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, already told you that. Why'd you have to come down to Peru to hear that answer again. We're just repeating what he said. I don't think the DMT elves are the shaitan, but I do think they actually showed me this creature, and I said, this creature is a hyena. It feeds off your negative energy. Stop being negative and it'll go away. And they were right. Since then, I try and like not be resentful of people who wronged me in the past, that sort of thing. I don't see the whatchamacallit, the sleep paralysis jinn as much in my dreams. Doesn't, if you've ever had one of those, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you can't move and you're like, just look at it, that kind of thing where you're sleeping. You know what I'm talking about. I don't deal with that guy as much. And when he does come around, I'm like, get out of here. And he leaves. A lot of Muslims have experiences like that. A lot of people around the world have experiences like that. But those things, they do feed off your negative energy. They do feed off your hate, your fears. Your sins. They love filth and death and destruction and chaos. They love it. It is possible to see jinn and encounter them, just like it's possible to encounter jinn in the dream world. So just as we say Ayatul Kursi and before we go to sleep, in a lot of shamanistic traditions before they do ayahuasca, DMT, whatever it is, whatever variation of it that they're doing, they prepare themselves, they bathe themselves. Some traditions will smoke cigarettes as a way to ward off evil spirits, or smoke tobacco out of a pipe. I don't know if that actually works, but the point is they also have an understanding, just like we have an understanding in Islam. Before you go to sleep, you should do wudu, wash your face, say Ayatul Kursi. They also have an understanding that before you go into this realm, to prepare yourself. So yes, you could see jinn, and they could attach yourselves to you. And in fact, I'm just going to say it, Sheikh Nurjan over at the Mohammedan Way, I think he has the best answer for why you should not do ayahuasca, because he doesn't say, that's hammer, just like wine and beer and cocaine. No, he says it's like you're going into that realm, and if you're not prepared, something dark could attach itself to you. So that is a real fear and concern. So some of the pro psychedelic Muslims in the comment section might be upset. Oh, Harry, why are you saying that? Because that's actually a real fear and concern, and you have to give the other side their due on that. I hope that clarifies it for you. And that was a long-winded answer, but I want to be clear.
Very interesting. It sounds like these were the biggest among the two big incidents in your life, the injury as well as this particular incident that you're referring to.
I wouldn't say they're the biggest
that?
incidents. I wouldn't say they're the biggest incidents, but they were pretty profound. Like I said, it does feel like a very intense type of dreaming. It does feel like dying, and dying is a very intense experience. And I also found a profound sense of love, and kindness and compassion, and their reaffirmation to stay on the right path and do good. There's a bunch of other details that I don't really want to share right now, but I would say that it was, I suspect, this is just thinking, this is not a Shaker scholarly answer. I suspect that there was a hikmah in allowing these sort of technology, if you will, to be allowed to be placed in South America, and that after materialism basically destroyed the West spiritually, scientism, the sort of like making science into a religion destroyed spirituality in the West. And psychedelics seem, for some people, are what turned the switch back on. It's like we were dead car batteries that needed a battery jump. And for some people, psychedelics were very helpful, and eventually that led them back to religion, and then back to ultimately to Islam. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf describes himself having a near-death experience when he was a teenager, where he almost died in a car accident. So there's something going on
Very
there.
interesting.
There's something going
So,
on.
yeah. So as we wrap up, what are some final thoughts you want people to take away?
Well, I know we had originally wanted to talk about other commentary regarding current cultural issues with immigration and assimilation. Um, I'm just we're jumping around between some very big topics here, but I just want to say this about immigration. Look,
No, we couldn't go over that whole experience and just leave it like it's quite a grand experience,
I
regardless of
appreciate
how
that.
you view it in terms of legality of Islam and etc. Like it sounds like a very big incident.
It was a good. I'm very grateful for the experience. We'll put it that way. But here's what I'm going to say about immigration, because I see a lot of I've been saying this increasingly over the last 10 years. I understand why Muslims living in the West and Muslims outside the West too are upset at the West, and I understand why people who have immigrated feel they're entitled to stay in the West. What I want to say is, um, look, we were psyopsed into hating you guys, and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about all the things that happened after that. But I also want to warn you guys, those of you who have sort of this like collective resentment against the West, I want to warn you, especially those of you who are immigrating to the West with a collective chip on your shoulder. One, you're going to end up holding a lot of people accountable who did not do anything wrong to you and probably aren't your enemy. And two, you are also being psyopsed to hate people by the same people that were psyopsing us to hate you. So I want to warn people about that. I'm not saying that Muslims cannot immigrate to the West. You're in Australia, like there's nothing wrong with a Muslim moving to Australia. But there are limitations to how much every country can handle with immigration. This country, Indonesia, that I'm sitting in right now, I love Indonesia. It's Indonesia Batik. I love it. There are limitations to how much any country can handle with immigration. So be careful, just as we were psyopsed to be used against you, be careful not to get psyopsed by the same forces against collective West, because that is also a trick from the shaitan. It's the same shaitan behind it. I'm just going to leave people with that.